What if I told you that some people don't just ignore your pain? They feel powerful because of it. And the most disturbing part is this: they may look calm, even caring, while your suffering quietly feeds them. If this is resonating and you're starting to see patterns you couldn't name before, pause for a moment and ground yourself. Then like this video, subscribe, and stay here, because understanding this psychology is the first step toward breaking its grip on you. When a narcissistic individual causes emotional pain, the reaction they experience internally is not guilt or concern, but a surge of perceived power. Power for them is not about leadership or stability, it is about impact. Seeing that their words, silence, withdrawal, or cruelty can destabilize another person reassures them that they matter. At the core of narcissism is a fragile self-concept that depends heavily on external validation, and pain becomes one of the most reliable indicators that they still have influence. If you hurt, it means they reached you, and reaching you confirms their psychological dominance. This is especially true when the person in pain is empathetic, loving, or emotionally expressive, because those traits make reactions more visible and therefore more rewarding. Unlike emotionally healthy individuals, narcissists often confuse control with connection. They may not feel bonded through intimacy, but they do feel anchored through dominance. Causing pain places them in the position of the one who acts rather than the one who reacts, and that role protects them from their deepest fear, which is feeling insignificant. Your distress becomes proof that they are not invisible, powerless, or ordinary. Even negative attention satisfies the nervous system of a narcissist because it activates a sense of superiority and importance that they cannot generate internally. There is also a physiological element involved. Emotional reactions from others can create a calming effect for narcissists, similar to how reassurance soothes anxiety in secure individuals. When you are shaken, they feel steady. When you are confused, they feel clear. This contrast creates an internal hierarchy where they are above the emotional chaos, reinforcing their self-image as dominant or untouchable. Over time, this dynamic can become habitual, where provoking pain is unconsciously used as a regulation strategy to manage their own insecurity and inner emptiness. What makes this especially damaging is that the narcissist may not appear overtly cruel while this is happening. They may remain composed, logical, or even dismissive, which amplifies the imbalance. Your pain feels loud while their calm feels powerful. And that imbalance is exactly where their sense of control lives, quietly reinforcing the behavior again and again without conscious reflection or remorse. For a narcissistic individual, control is not just something they desire. It is something they rely on to feel psychologically stable. When you are in pain, confused, or emotionally reactive, it reassures them that they still occupy a central position in your emotional world. Your suffering becomes a signal that they can still influence your thoughts, moods, and sense of self. This is deeply regulating for them because narcissism is rooted in insecurity, not confidence. Control over others temporarily quiets the internal fear of abandonment, irrelevance, or exposure. Your pain also functions as confirmation that you have not emotionally detached. As long as you are hurting, explaining, or trying to be understood, the narcissist interprets this as proof that they still matter. Emotional distress equals emotional investment in their mind. Even negative reactions feel safer than indifference because indifference suggests loss of control, and loss of control triggers panic. This is why narcissists often escalate behaviors when they sense you pulling away emotionally. The goal is not resolution, but reestablishing dominance over your emotional state. Another critical element is their distorted view of relationships. Healthy bonds are built on mutual influence and care, but narcissists experience relationships as hierarchies. Someone must be above and someone must be below. When you are in pain, you are placed in the below position, and that positioning reinforces their sense of authority and entitlement. It allows them to feel important without having to be emotionally available, accountable, or self-reflective. There is also an avoidance mechanism at play. When you are focused on your own pain, you are less likely to challenge their behavior or demand change. Your suffering keeps the spotlight off their shortcomings. This dynamic protects them from shame, which is one of the most intolerable emotions for a narcissist. Control, therefore, is not only about power over you, but also about protection from themselves. Over time, this pattern trains the narcissist to associate your pain with safety and stability. They may not consciously think, "I need you to hurt," but their nervous system learns that your distress keeps the relationship predictable and manageable. As long as you are emotionally affected, they feel secure in their position, and that sense of security becomes something they unconsciously guard and reinforce through repeated controlling behaviors. A defining feature of narcissism is a profound deficit in emotional empathy, and this deficit radically alters how they perceive another person's suffering. While they may intellectually recognize that someone is in pain, they do not emotionally register that pain as something urgent, meaningful, or deserving of care. Instead of feeling concern, their system stays emotionally detached. This detachment creates a psychological distance that allows them to observe pain without discomfort, almost as if it belongs to someone else entirely. Because they are not internally activated by your suffering, there is no natural break that says, "Stop, this is hurting someone." In healthy individuals, empathy creates an automatic emotional feedback loop. Seeing someone cry triggers unease, compassion, or a desire to repair the rupture. In narcissists, that loop is weak or absent. Without it, your pain does not register as a signal to soften or self-correct. It registers as information. Information about how much you care, how affected you are, how emotionally accessible you remain. This neutral or analytical processing of pain can feel chilling to those on the receiving end because it lacks the warmth and responsiveness people expect in close relationships. This empathy gap also allows narcissists to rationalize harmful behavior with ease. Because they do not feel your pain internally, they can downplay it, deny it, or frame it as exaggerated. They may tell themselves you are too sensitive, dramatic, or unstable. These narratives are not just excuses, they are protective mechanisms that keep them from confronting the reality of their impact. Acknowledging your pain as real and significant would require emotional accountability, and accountability threatens their carefully maintained self-image. Another consequence of this empathy deficit is emotional asymmetry. You may be flooded with feelings while they appear calm, controlled, or indifferent. This imbalance can make you question your own reactions and reality. Over time, repeated exposure to this dynamic can erode your self-trust because you are emotionally responding to pain that the other person treats as inconsequential or imaginary. What makes this especially damaging is that the lack of empathy does not always look like overt cruelty. It can look like silence, minimization, logic without compassion, or emotional absence during moments when support is needed most. The harm comes not only from what they do, but from what they fail to feel, leaving your pain unseen, unheld, and unresolved. For a narcissistic individual, pain in others functions as a form of validation that reinforces their internal narrative of superiority and entitlement. Narcissism is built around an inflated self-image that must be constantly protected and reinforced from the outside. When someone else is hurt, destabilized, or emotionally diminished, it creates a contrast that allows the narcissist to feel elevated. Your pain places them in the position of being stronger, smarter, more composed, or more important, and that contrast is deeply soothing to their fragile sense of self. Entitlement plays a major role in this dynamic. Narcissists often believe they are owed admiration, compliance, loyalty, or emotional labor without having to earn it. When you suffer as a result of their behavior, instead of questioning themselves, they interpret it as evidence of their importance. In their distorted logic, if someone is affected so deeply, it must mean they are significant enough to cause that impact. Pain becomes proof that they matter more, that their actions carry weight, and that they sit above you in the emotional hierarchy of the relationship. This sense of superiority is especially reinforced when you attempt to explain your hurt. Vulnerability in this context is not received as trust, but as submission. Your openness can be interpreted as weakness, while their emotional distance is experienced as strength. The more emotionally expressive you are, the more justified they feel in seeing themselves as composed, rational, or above the emotional mess they attribute to you. This imbalance feeds their belief that they are exceptional and that you are flawed, unstable, or less evolved. There is also a competitive element beneath the surface. Narcissists often experience relationships as silent contests for dominance. When you are in pain, you are losing that contest. Your suffering signals that they have won control of the emotional field. This win temporarily silences their internal insecurity and reinforces the belief that they deserve to be on top, setting the terms, defining reality, and remaining unchallenged. Because this validation feels so stabilizing, they are rarely motivated to stop the behavior. Acknowledging your pain as harmful would require relinquishing the sense of superiority it provides, and that loss would feel far more threatening to them than the damage caused to you. Emotional reactions function as a primary source of psychological fuel for a narcissistic individual, often referred to as supply, because they provide the attention, validation, and stimulation they cannot generate internally. When you react with tears, anger, anxiety, or desperation, it confirms that they are emotionally relevant and impactful. The intensity of your response matters more than whether it is positive or negative. What feeds them is the fact that they can evoke a reaction at all, because that reaction reassures them that they exist powerfully in your emotional world. This dynamic is rooted in an unstable sense of self. Narcissists struggle with chronic emptiness and boredom, and emotional reactions from others temporarily fill that void. Your pain becomes an external regulator for their internal state. When you are emotionally charged, they feel energized, grounded, or even calm by comparison. The emotional contrast gives them a sense of vitality and control that is otherwise missing from their inner experience. Negative emotional reactions can be especially potent because they often come with urgency and intensity. Anger, fear, and distress tend to hold attention longer and provoke repeated engagement. This is why narcissists may provoke, dismiss, or invalidate rather than comfort. Resolution would end the emotional exchange, but prolonged pain keeps the flow of attention coming. Your attempts to explain, defend yourself, or seek understanding extend the interaction and deepen their access to your emotional energy. There is also a reinforcing learning process involved. Over time, narcissists unconsciously associate certain behaviors with reliable emotional payoff. If withdrawal, sarcasm, or cruelty consistently produces strong reactions, those behaviors are more likely to be repeated. This conditioning happens beneath conscious awareness. They may not think in terms of manipulation, but their nervous system learns what works to secure attention and emotional stimulation. What makes this especially damaging is that the narcissist's need for supply often overrides concern for the other person's well-being. Your pain is not seen as a warning sign to stop, but as confirmation that the dynamic is working. When reactions lessen, they may escalate tactics to restore the flow. Silence, calm boundaries, or emotional neutrality can therefore feel threatening to them because these responses starve the supply they depend on. This pattern explains why disengagement and emotional detachment are so destabilizing for narcissists. Without access to your reactions, they are forced to confront the emptiness they work so hard to avoid. And that absence of stimulation can feel unbearable, even though it is exactly what allows you to begin healing. Vulnerability has a powerful psychological impact on a narcissistic individual because it places them at the center of your emotional world. When you open up, express fear, confusion, or dependence, it signals that they hold a meaningful position in your inner life. For someone who struggles with chronic feelings of emptiness and insignificance, this can feel intoxicating. Your vulnerability makes them feel important, influential, and necessary, even if they are the source of the pain itself. Being needed in this distorted way temporarily stabilizes their fragile self-worth. Narcissists often lack a stable internal sense of value, so they rely on external cues to feel significant. When you lean on them emotionally, seek reassurance, or reveal your wounds, it creates the illusion that they are powerful enough to affect your emotional survival. This does not trigger protective instincts in the way it would for an empathetic person. Instead, it reinforces their sense of dominance and relevance. Your openness becomes evidence that they matter more than others, that they occupy a unique and elevated role in your life. There is also a dependency dynamic that develops around vulnerability. When you are emotionally exposed, you may begin to look to them for validation, clarity, or relief. This reliance feeds their need to feel indispensable. Even if they withhold comfort or offer it inconsistently, the fact that you want something from them strengthens their position. They may oscillate between being distant and briefly supportive, not to heal you, but to maintain the sense that they control access to emotional relief. Your vulnerability can also make them feel superior. While you are struggling, uncertain, or emotionally raw, they may experience themselves as composed, strong, or unaffected. This contrast reinforces their self-image as someone above emotional weakness. Instead of recognizing vulnerability as courage or trust, they interpret it as proof that you are less capable, less stable, or less powerful than they are. Over time, this dynamic can trap you in a cycle where being open leads to more harm. Yet withholding vulnerability feels impossible because you are emotionally invested. The narcissist benefits from this imbalance, as your continued openness keeps them feeling relevant and significant, even as your emotional needs remain unmet and your sense of self slowly erodes under the weight of being seen but not truly held. At the core of narcissism lies an intense, often unconscious sense of shame that is deeply threatening to their self-image. This shame is not experienced in a reflective or corrective way, but as something dangerous that must be avoided at all costs. When a narcissist feels inadequate, criticized, or exposed, the internal discomfort can feel overwhelming. Rather than processing this shame internally, they externalize it, pushing it outward and attaching it to someone else. Your pain becomes a convenient container for emotions they cannot tolerate within themselves. Projection allows them to disown parts of themselves they find unacceptable. Feelings of weakness, failure, or worthlessness are redirected onto you through blame, criticism, or emotional punishment. When you begin to hurt, doubt yourself, or feel ashamed, it creates a sense of relief for them. The discomfort has been relocated. In that moment, they feel cleaner, stronger, and more intact because the painful emotions are no longer theirs to carry. This is why they may seem calmer or more confident while you are unraveling. This dynamic also distorts reality within the relationship. The narcissist positions themselves as the reasonable one, while you are framed as overly emotional, flawed, or unstable. Your suffering becomes evidence that something is wrong with you rather than a response to their behavior. This narrative protects them from accountability and allows them to maintain their grandiose self-concept. If you are the problem, they never have to look inward. There is also a reinforcing feedback loop at work. Each time they successfully offload shame onto you, the behavior becomes more ingrained. Causing pain becomes a subconscious strategy for emotional regulation. Instead of learning to tolerate discomfort or self-reflect, they learn that shifting distress onto others works faster and feels safer. Over time, this can make the pattern more automatic and less conscious. For the person on the receiving end, this process is deeply destabilizing. You may find yourself carrying emotions that do not fully belong to you, feeling guilt or shame that seems disproportionate or confusing. This is not a reflection of your worth or sensitivity, but the result of someone else's inability to face their inner reality. Your pain becomes the price of their emotional avoidance, leaving you burdened with feelings that were never meant to be yours to hold. The enjoyment a narcissist derives from another person's pain is often not a conscious or openly acknowledged feeling. Instead, it operates beneath awareness, driven by automatic psychological and nervous system responses. Narcissists rarely sit with the thought that they like seeing someone suffer because that idea conflicts with their self-image as reasonable, justified, or even victimized. What they experience instead is a subtle sense of calm, relief, or empowerment when someone else is distressed without fully connecting that feeling to the harm being caused. This subconscious process is rooted in conditioning. Over time, the narcissist's system learns that certain situations reliably produce internal regulation. When someone reacts emotionally, becomes destabilized, or shows hurt, the narcissist feels more in control, more grounded, or less anxious. The mind does not label this as enjoyment, but the body registers it as soothing. Because the relief is real, the behavior that produced it is likely to be repeated, even without conscious intent. Self-justification plays a major role in keeping this process hidden. Narcissists are highly skilled at constructing narratives that absolve them of responsibility. They may believe they are being honest, setting boundaries, teaching a lesson, or simply reacting to provocation. These stories allow them to maintain moral superiority while continuing behavior that causes harm. The enjoyment is masked as righteousness, logic, or self-protection, making it difficult for them to recognize their own role in the dynamic. Another factor is emotional disconnection. Narcissists often experience their own emotions in a fragmented or blunted way. Because of this, they may not register pleasure, guilt, or cruelty in clear emotional terms. Instead, they feel shifts in tension, power, or control. When your pain reduces their inner discomfort, the nervous system notes the change, even if the conscious mind does not analyze it. This disconnect allows them to benefit from your suffering without fully realizing what they are benefiting from. For the person being hurt, this unconscious enjoyment can feel especially disturbing because it lacks obvious malice. There may be no overt gloating or cruelty, only an unsettling sense that your pain is somehow being used. Recognizing that this dynamic is often subconscious does not excuse it, but it helps explain why reasoning, explaining, or appealing to empathy rarely leads to change, as the process is not guided by awareness, but by deeply ingrained psychological patterns.